Okay, so we have a lot to cover today. Let's try to move along here. A lot of different nakudas. Just to finish off one point we were talking about last year, that the Gemara and Vavam and Beis and Avodah Zarah, Minayin shelo yoshit adam kos shel yayin lenazir ve'ever min achai lebnei noach. These two things the Gemara chose as the prototype of Lifnei Iver, which is a kos yayin lenazir and a ever min achai to a goy. Tamalom Lifnei Iver los in Mikshol. And we had over here the issue that for it's Islay, he could pick it up himself. We said, no, it's only with your Moshe. You have to Moshe it to him and makes a dumya to try Ivri Nahar. So we'll talk more about that later. So we mentioned last time that Tosas is bothered, and the Rishonim are all bothered by why do we pick these two examples of all things? Tosas says it's Hud in Kol Yisurin. So why do we pick this one? So Tosas says that we picked the Yain Nazir because it's the Mistama, the Mishtik Aboyle. Since everybody in the world drinks wine, and as long as it's kosher and everything, there's nothing that's keeping away from it, and maybe, so the example over here would be Shama Shachach Min Yizruso. There's a good possibility he forgot that he's a Nazir. So you're giving him something that is obviously going to be drunk, because the Tosas says Lashon Mistama. The Mistama the Mishtika. If he wants it, the Mistama, like there's a Chazaka. The stomach is like a type of a chazaka that he wants it for drinking. He's not going to use it for, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin and other places that there's, yain is sometimes used as ziluf, that they would sprinkle it around the floors and stuff like that. But that's a very rare thing. Someone asks for a glass of wine, so then pashtus they mean it, it's a chazaka, they need it for drinking. So it has to be dumya to that. So it says the chiddush of this is this dumya to Yain the Nazir, and I guess, and certainly Huadin, Abram and Achai to Ben Noach, that it's a regular piece of meat that they would always eat. And if they don't care, then they're gonna eat this Abram and Achai. So that's the example of Lifnei Iver. It has to be a type of Avera that Mustama they're going to be over. If it's a Mustama. Now, Rashi says a different lesson. Rashi says over here, Lo Yoshit Adam Kos Yain the Nazir Shema Yavol Ishtosai. So it sounds like there are achronim that are medayek that there's a misodas to kamachlokas to Rashi and Tosas over here, that Rashi holds that it's already lifnei iver if it's shema. You put it in a situation that there's a possibility it'll be over, then that's a problem. And Mashiach Tosas says you need a mistama that is going to be over. It's more of a type of a chazaka. He'll be over. That's what he wants it for. So we'll speak more about this Rashi and Tosas when we get to we talk to the sugya and Tezvav and Beis, that over there the Gemara says talinan. It's much over there that even the full Lifnei Iver, if there's a possibility that it's going to be used for the Isser or something else, then we're totally on the hakel. So we'll come back to this rediscuss that when we get to there. If we say Talinan, then how could Rashi say over here Shema Yavel Dishtoso? How could Rashi say over here Shema Yavel Dishtoso is enough to make it Lifnei Iver when over there the Gemara Tezvav and Beis says it's for of Talinan. That you're allowed to give something to someone if there's a tzad isser, as long as there's a tzad heter as well. So we have to understand. Well, when we get there, Mr. Shem, we'll talk about that. Al-Kopanim, so the Tosas answer over here was that we need this type of mistama. The Ran added another nakuda over here, it's different than Tosas, that the yayin is mutter for the one that's giving it to him. There's no isser on the person who is giving the yain to the Nazir. It's only to the Nazir himself that has the Isser. So you might have thought there's not a problem, Kamash Malan, that we're still answering it. We're still saying it's Asr. So it would just very much bother me. It's a Pelitic Asfora. Why would I think that it makes a difference on the one who was putting the mikshol? If it's, you put a stumbling block in front of somebody, then it should be the person you're putting in front of. Manaf Kamina, if you're the one that's giving it, it's not an Isser. Manaf Kamina. But in fact, there is a shita of the Munah Shmuel, it's quoted by certain achronim, Pri Chadash and others quote this in Munah Shmuel. Munah Shmuel learns that there is only an Isra of Eivri Min Achai when Taka is usher to the one that's giving it as well. So the Pri Chadash is cholik on him, and others are cholik. There is such a shita and achronim, a chashuv shita and achronim that they all discuss. And it's a pellet to me, like, what's even the tzad? It's taka or cholak on that, but what's even the tzad to say this should be totally in that, and the noisen. I don't really have a good answer for that. Okay. We'll see that the Ritva has another mahalach, which we'll get back to. We're not going to go into right now, but we'll get back to. So now the one thing that comes out from this Tosfos, and the end of Tosfos, which we'll spend a little time speaking about now. Tosfos says that Ulafiza also the Hoshit the Mumrim Avodas Kachavim. Tosfos continues to say that since the Chiddush over here is you need Mistama, he's going to be over the Avera. That's when there's a Lifnei Iver. So if you're giving treif, you have a Jewish friend that asks you to hand him the box of treif, whatever, so he has a cheskes kashrus, then it's fine to give it to that person because there's no stomach that he's going to eat it. On the contrary, he probably just wants it to sell or whatever he's going to do with it. You can be somewhat on that you're allowed to give it to him. However, he says the fizeh, according to this svara, it's also the hoshit the mumrin the avodas kachavim davri iser. It's also to be moshit, using the lashon of Gemara over here. Moshit means he couldn't get to it himself. To a mumr avodah zara, a dvar iser, because once he's a mumr avodah zara, he's going to eat the treif also. So then you're not allowed to avapishu shalahem, even though it's his thing. Because it's also the davar yadua, like it's a vadai that he's going to be eating it. It's a davar pashat. Even though he's a mummer of the Vodazar, he's still a Yisrael Gomer. Did I tell you guys the mice of the Gra with the worker in his house? There's a mice brought down, and it's very musmach. I think it's in the Kesser Rosh from Chaim Volozhin, or one of those farms, that there was a worker, a meshumid by the Gra working. It was like had to do some. He was a contractor for the house or something like that, and he was a Jew, but he was a Christian. He was a meshumid, and so it came time for lunch, and the guy was hungry, so they came to the Gra and asked if they're allowed to give him to eat. So he said no, he's not going to make a bracha. So the mummer overheard that. He burst out laughing and said, "Make a bracha, I'm a Christian." So the Gra screamed at him and said that you think you're a Christian, you're gonna be burned in hell for every piece of food you ate without a bracha during your entire life. So hearing those words coming out of the Gra with that, so then he became a Baal Tshuva Gomer. We wish it was that easy, right? We can just get a group of NCSYers and say, guys. So I guess when we'll be the Gra, we'll be able to do that. So, okay. Anyway, so that's what Tosfos is saying over here, is that even though he's a mummer of Avodas Kachavim, he's still Yisrael Gomer, and it's still usher to give it to him. He says, as long as the Tosfos ends off, when is it usher to give it to this guy? That's only when it's trei iver, like the Gemara says over here. So in other words, Tosfos is keeping it in the realm of lifnei iver without expanding any further. And the Rush as well says the same thing as Tosfos. So it's mashma lehedya from Tosfos in the Rush that by a mummer, if you have this guy who's a mummer who he's probably going to eat treif. If it's l'chad iver nahar, if it's something he could pick up himself, he could pick it up and take it. So then there's no isser to give it to him. There's no isser. So everybody asks that there seems to be a steer in Tosfos and in the Rush as well, because in the beginning of Shabbos, in Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, we've had that in the Marmakomos, that Tosfos and the Rush over there say that in the Maisa of the Usher and the Ani by Tilta B'Hotzah from Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabin. So we had Isser D'Rabbanan, Isser D'Oraisa, and sometimes they're both being over an Isser. So the Gemara says over there that if the Baal Bas is holding the Chayfetz in his hand and the other person is B'chutz, so then it's Pater Umutter, because the Baal Bas didn't do anything. The one outside is doing the picking up and taking it out. He did the full Maisa, the Akira and the Hanacha. So there's no Isser on the Baal Bais. Somebody here trying to get in.
It's me on my desktop.
Oh, okay. So so the Gemara says it's pater or mutter. It's the Gamri mutter over there. So Tosfos over there and the Rosh are bothered by a question: how can it be mutter that sof kol sof there's an Isser Rabbanan of Messiah? And the Ran here as well. The Ran over here also has the same kasha in our sugya. That how could you say it's mutter, like Tosfos and the Rosh are saying, there's still an Isser Messiah midrabanan. There's also the Sayaya Yisrael to do any avera. So how could you be standing there with the object knowing Yisrael is going to take it from your hand and take it outside? So Tosfos makes an akimta that the one who's taking it is a goy, and even though you're not allowed to goy, we learned in last sugya, you can't have a goy take objects out of your house on Shabbos. It's talking about it's owned by the goy as well. So when his own things, he's allowed to take in and out all day the Jewish house, as long as it's owned. There's a big ukimta in the Gemara. That's the Tosfos and the Rosh. Look over there. You have to say, in order to take away all the other side problems of Messiah and Hotzah, of Hotzas, that's Nirak Amir Lakam. So it comes out the Tosfos and the Rosh there, and the Ran over here all say that there's clearly speak out there's an Isser D'Rabbanan of Messiah. So how does Tosfos over here and the Rosh say that the only time it's usher to give it to a mummer is if it's Trey Even Nahar? If you can't get to it, if you're Moshe to him, if you can get it himself, then there's no Isser at all. Why? What about the Isser Messiah? So it seems to be a sphera in Tosfos. You could say maybe it's two Balei Tosfos, but that's not going to help because the Rosh says like Tosfos here and like over there. It's only one Baal HaRosh. So this is a serious problem, a serious issue. So the Shach, we saw in your day on Kufman Aleph, Sivkat and Vav, the Shach comes to answer this question by saying that there's a chiluk between a mummer and not a mummer. The Gemara in Shabbos is talking about just a regular Jew. Tosfos Rosh talking about a regular Jew, and maybe he forgot what's going on, whatever. So he's not intending necessarily to do an avera. And so there, if you stand there and let him take it and bring it outside without stopping him, then you're bringing over Isser, not Lifnei Iver, because he could get it anyway. It's a situation where he could pick it up himself. But you standing there and aiding him in any way is an Isser Midrabanan of Messiah. That's Masha Enken over here, the Shach says, the Tosfos explicitly speaks out, we're talking about a mummer. So by a mummer, even though there might be an Isser of Lifnei Iver, like Tosfos says, but when there's not Lifnei Iver, there's also not an Isser of Messiah. That's what the Shach says. So we saw that the Dagam Avava from the Noda B'Yehuda, Dagam Avava right there on that Shach, on Shulchan Aruch, he asked the kasha, that obvious kasha, that how can you say that there's no Isser Messiah the mummer, like a mummer like this says over here, he's mechuyev kol mitzvahs. How can you help him? How can you messiah him to be over an avera? What does the Shach mean? So the Dagam Avava says that the pshat in the Shach is that in a situation where he's coming to do up a mazid and you can't stop him, and if you could stop him, if somebody else could stop him, then you're not allowed to be messiah him. You're mechuyev to just like the Ran says, the mechuyev to be mocha, and you're mechuyev to there's a din of arvus that we're Kol Yisrael Raven Mizah. So just like if we're responsible for them, we also are mechuyev to make sure that they're not over averas. We're responsible for them, just like on the positive side, that the din arvus tells me that I can be motzi somebody else in a mitzvah. I can do even if I'm yotze already. I think we spoke about this once. I was already yotze t'kiyah shofar. I can still blow for somebody else because he's mechuyev. That arvus makes me mechuyev as well, so I can be motzi him. Who did the opposite? He's coming to do an avera. I certainly can. I'm chayav lafrushim yisura. I have to try to stop him from being over averas. Kol shekan, I can't help him do an avera. So, but however, when he's a mummer, he's coming, which means he's coming to do it b'mezid. He doesn't care, and I can't stop him anyway. He could do it himself, and I couldn't stop him. So if I couldn't stop him, he's going to do it in Manoshach. Then the Isser, then there's no Isser Rabbanan of the Sayeh. That's what the Shach comes out. Now that answers a stira in Tosas. Tosas and Shabbos and the Rush are talking about a regular Jew, and Tosas and the Rush and Avodah Zarah are talking about a mummer. So it's a different din by a regular Jew and a mummer. That's the Shach's Teretz. Now the Magen Avram, we saw in Shin Mem Zayin, Sif Daled, Sif Katan Daled, in the Halachos Hotzah, the Magen Avram brings down that Mishnah with the Shulchan Aruch going on that Mishnah in Shabbos of Hotzah. So the Magen Avram is very, very, is cholak on the Shach. We'll take a look just over there for a second that what Betzin they're going on. Take a step back before we talk about the Magen Avram, just to go back to the Shach for a minute. The Shach in Kufnan Aleph, Sifkat and Vav, it's going on the Ramah over there. And the Ramah is going on our Sugi and Tav Tes Vav, things that are Muchad for Avodah Zarah, you can't sell it to them, and they're this Lifnei Iver. So the Ramah says that Yesh Omrim Haga Asher Limkor Lahem Dvarim Shayachim LaVodasa, that is also to sell them things which are shaykh to Avodah Zarah. Hanadavka im ein lahem acherim ki yotzaboy, v'shelo yuchlu liknos v'makam acher. It's only if they can't buy it somewhere else, or they can't get to it in some other way. Im yecholim liknos v'makam acher mutar them kol lahem kol davar. That you're allowed to sell to them. So it's b'shem the Mordechai, and then he says v'yesh machmirim. There are those that are cholik and machmir. So the way the Shach learns is that the Yesh Machmirim is the Tosfos in Avodah Zarah by us. I'm sorry, the Tosfos in Shabbos that says is Isser Messiah, and the first sheet will be the Tosfos in by us that we're talking about Avodah Zarah and Mumar and Avodah Zarah, the same thing, that there's no chiyuv of Frushim Yisura from them, because they can do it to themselves and they don't care. So there's no Isra Frushim Yisura, there's also no Isra Messiah. So the Shach learns in the Ramah, that the Ramah is learning that it's a machlokas between the two Balei Tosfos. That it's a taka machlokas. And that's why there's Yesh Matirim and Yesh Machmirim. So the Shach is coming to be cholik on the Ramah and saying, no, you're making a mistake. There is no machlokas. There's no Yesh Matirim, Yesh Machmirim. It's two separate cases. The Yesh Matirim is talking about a case of a mummer. The Yesh Machmirim is talking about a case where it's not a mummer. So you're wrong to make it into a machlokas. It's not a machlokas. It's just two separate cases. That's all it is. That's the shita of the Shach. Mash'enken, the Magen Avram, Shemem Zayin. So he's cholik on the Shach, and he learns. He brings a lashon Rashi. Rashi in Avodah Zarah, Nun Hey Amud Aleph, the last Rashi on the page on the Mishnah there, whether you're allowed to be darich im overkachavim and megat. You can crush the grapes together with the goy you both stand together in the gats and you step on the grapes to make it into wine. So Rashi over there says that V'lo amrinan mistake b'sor hanohu. Dafilu b'shtia savra ki'atanu d'shari calls manshal yor dabor. So it's a mahogs tanoim. That Tana holds that there's no isser on the wine until it goes down into the actual collection place. But for the fact that the goy stepped on it doesn't make it also yet. We're not passing the way, but that's what he holds. We should gorim tuma leka. You're also not gorim the tuma. Shemisha shetarach b'hem avukachavim ma'at mitru. And because as soon as the goy has stepped on it, so then it's already become tameh. So you're not going into tuma either. And last thing Rashi says, mishum misayeya de over avera leka she'avukachavim lo nitztavo kach. There's no misayeya over here either, because the goy has no tzivui on. There's no isra for him to make the wine tameh, or to even to turn it to yain nesach. The yain nesach won't be, but just for him to step on it, that word goes to Rabbanan, that's not a problem for him. He's not actually being over it. So Rashi says that in this case, there's a technicality why there's no Messiah, because in this case, the goy is not mitzvah on it. But you see clearly from Rashi that, and this is Magen Avraham Medayek, you see clearly from Rashi that if it would be something that the goy is mitzvah in, like a Avodah Zarah, then so not only is there an Isser of Lifnei Iver, there's also an Isser of Messiah to him. It's an Isser of Messiah. And the Rebbe Kiveger over there on that Rashi says to look at the Magen Avraham. So the Magen Avraham says we see that there is a shita that holds there's Messiah also even by a goy, Kolshakin by a mummer. So you, the Shach, want to say that there's no Isser at all of Messiah by a mummer in a case where you can't stop him. And here you see from the Rashi over there that even in a case where you could stop him, still there's an Isser Messiah. There's still, I can't do anything to aid him in doing something which he's not allowed to do. Even by a goy, Kolshakin by a mummer, which we are mechuyev l'afrishim yisur when we can. So there is an Isser Messiah. So it comes out very sodistic hamachlokas between the Magen Avraham and the Shach, whether there is Messiah by a mummer, even in a case where you could not stop him. So now the Gra by us in Kufnan Aleph, so the Gra sides strong. He agrees with the Yesh Machmirim in the Ramah. He holds that it is a machlokas, and he disagrees with the Shach and goes with the Magen Avraham, as well as does the Mishnah Berurah just quotes the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham doesn't quote the Shach. It seems that however, there's a Piskei Tshuva in the name of the Chavis Yoyer, who's talking about a fascinating case of what often when you have like a kosher schlachtais, when they shecht, so a lot of the high percentage of the animals are treif. Also, you can't use the hindquarters, so they would always sell that to a goy. They have an arrangement that goes to a goy automatically, whatever it's treif for the hindquarters. So this Jew had a arrangement with a certain goy, and then he's doing this for a while, and then suddenly this goy marries a Jewish woman who was a mumeris, who became a Christian, and she went and married this goy. So now there's a Jewish woman in the house. So can he continue to sell this meat to this goy? Now it's going to be lifnei iver to bring the meat into the house there to give meat to this Jewish woman who's, even though she's a mumeris, but she's still mechuyeves, like Tosa says that a mumer leves chavim is still nesel lehem ki Yisrael. Yisrael gamer chashlim alei. So there's a long piece of Piskei Tshuva over here. It's kind of see it inside, but the final analysis is that lifnei iver it's not because he could get meat somewhere else. It's not trei ivri nahar, and Messiah, since she's a mumeris and you can't stop her. There's no way to stop her from eating treif meat, so she'll do it anyway. So then there's also no Isser Messiah like the Shach. His whole dealing back and forth is all with the Shach. So you see that Taka he holds that way, and there are other achronim as well to go with this mahalach. So it really comes out to be the halach l'maisa. It's a major machlokas achronim how we paskin over here. Do we paskin like the Shach or like the Magen Avraham? There's a tshuva for Moshe Feinstein has okay, I'll tell you what, before we get to our Moshe, I just want to speak out one other nakuda, because just to understand the sugya a little bit better, I just want to point out something, that I had a big kasha on this whole thing, that the lashon of Tosfos and the Ran and the Rosh, as we were mentioning about Messiah, they say lahedya, they say explicitly that Messiah is Drabanan. They say even though there's no, in a case where there's not trei iver nahar, it's within his reach to get it. There is no lifnei iver, midaraisa, but midarabanan, you're still b'chuyev l'afrishim yisur, and therefore you can't be Messiah. So they all say explicitly that it's a drabanan. I was very bothered by this, that if there's a chiyuv tochacha, the chiyuv tochacha, which is a ochiach tochiach hasam yisecha, is a mitzvah deraisa. It's mamash one of the taryag mitzvahs deraisa, and the chiyuv l'afrishim yisura is nichlal in mitzvah tochacha. How could it be that the sayaya is only nisr derbanan? To be sayah somebody, you're you're being mevatel mitzvah tachacha, and that should be a bittul mitzvah aseh deraisa. Why are we only calling that Rabbanan? Bothered me for a long time, but I saw the lesson of the Ritva in Davav Beis. It says here that talking about Trei Iver Nahar, he says V'chen Halacha. He says that's the Trei Iver Nahar. That's only the Gabe Lifnei Iver. That's only the Ver of Lifnei Iver. He says Af B'She Efshar Shu Marbe B'Isra Ayidenu Loch Hashinan. Even though he could, let's say he could get one animal is within his reach, or he has one already, and you give him one more, so your Marbe B'Isra. That's still it's a chiddush in the Ritva, but for Ribui Shiurim, there's no problem of Lifnei Iver for Ribui to add more onto what he could already do. That's a discussion on its own right. I'm not quite sure why that's so, but that's the way the Ritva takes on that Ribui Shiurim. There's no problem of. He says Aval Mikol Makom Itavale Beferish L'Isura. If he explicitly is asking for something that's an Isser, Nehi to Bishum Lifnei Iver Leka, even though there is no Lifnei Iver, like he said, Akati Isur B'Mil, so there's still an Isser. Mishum Sayeya De Agravera. Kol Sh'anu Garmim Lo Lasas Isser or Laharbos B'Isser. Anytime we're garmim to an Isser or it's Marba the Isser, there's a Ribui Isser. He has enough to eat one kazayas of an Isser, and you give him another kazayas, then you're over an Isser Messiah. He says, like we learn in a Mishnah that you can't be Messiah a Yisrael on Shviz, to be plow on Shviz or to eat what's that sort. Not only that, not only can you not be Messiah, he says, Mamash, what we're saying, you're Mechuyah to be Moichahem, to call Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. I'm not sure why he just says Kol Yisrael Arevim. It doesn't mention the mitzvah Tachacha, but he's saying that Arvus is a Sfor Deraisa, like the Sfor of Arevim is a Sfor, like we mentioned before. You can be see somebody a mitzvah Deraisa because of Arvus. So Arvus is a Sfor Deraisa, and I'm Mechuyah to daiga that a Jew doesn't do an avera. But kol sheken she'asar lehem ligrom lehem lasos shum iser or laharbos b'isur klal. Kavachomer. If I'm mechuyah to be mochet to him, to stop him because of arvus, kol sheken I can't do any siyua to help him or to marbe any iser for him at all. So this kol sheken of the ritva, if it's a kol sheken from the din of arvus, then it's mashma for the ritva that it's taka and iser deraisa. So it's appelled to me then how is the Rishonim only mentioning that it is a Drabanan? So Baruch Hashem, I found in the Shar Tzion on that in Shimem Zion over there where the Magen Avraham is. It's in the Shar Tzion and Os Ches over there. I don't have one with me. Maybe I'll pause for a second. I'll quickly go get it. I had big hana when I saw this Shar Tzion. Okay, first he brings down in the Mishnah Berurah here, Tal Magen Avraham, and there's an Issa Drabanan of Messiah. And he says, L'chora mashakasa Drabanan lav dafkahu. The Drabanan is lav dafka. That's only an Issa Drabanan. Fimad Isa brachos daf yutesen beis roar l'chavera shalavish kalayim. You see somebody who's wearing kalayim, you have to have him get his I feel him a shuk to tell him to take off his clothes, take off that jacket. And it's mashma in the Gemara. He says that it's not a takana d'Rabbanan ba'almahu; it is a chiyuv d'Oraisa. You can who did l'nyanenu how the mechuyev limchayis biyado min Torah k'nei lafrisha mi'iser. It's a chiyuv d'Oraisa to mafresh someone mi'iser. He's coming to take the object out of my hand and take it from shus yachad to shus rabim. I'm mechuyev mid'Oraisa to mocha biyado. So how could it be that it's only the Rabbanan to let him do it? To say him. How could it only be an Isser Rabbanan on him? What does Tosfos mean? Even though we know that Lifnei Iver won't apply like Tosfos says, since the one outside he has the ability to pick it up himself, So it's not Trey Iver Nahar, so it's not Lifnei Iver, like our Gemara says in Avodah Zarah. Al Kol Panim Halamina Torah Mechuyev Lamanoi Me'Isser. Still, okay, fine, Lifnei Iver it's not, but there's a different Chiyuv to be Manea him the Isser. So how could it only be an Isser Rabbanan? What does this mean? Nearly Yashiv. The Hechad Amina La'ani Kalayim, the Mechuyev Lamanoi, Hechash Yesh B'Yoda Lamanoi, Adi Pshita, Chiagavna. When are you mechuyev b'deraisa to stop somebody? It's when it's biyado to be manehim, when you have the ability to do so. If you don't have the ability to stop him, so then you're not mechuyev b'deraisa to stop him. You can't. So your deraisa is paka. You don't have a chiyuv. So you have to say in a kinta that we're talking over here in a case where you don't have the ability to stop him. And the Kamashmal and Harush, then the Kiddush of the Rush is in Tosus over there, and also we'll say the Rand, Afilu Hachi Isidra Banan Yesh. The Kiddush is that even when there's not an Isser Deraisa of stopping him, because you don't have the ability to mocha and stop him, so that Deraisa there's not, still, the Rishonim Machadish, still there's an Isser Banan to Bisayah, to help him. That's the way the Sharsian learns.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Is that according to just the Shach?
No, he doesn't mention the Shach. No, he's saying that even the Magen Avram, the whole Mishnah Berurah doesn't mention the Shach. He's talking in the Magen Avram. Even the Magen Avram that says there is an Isser Messiah by a mummer, that will only be a mummer that you could potentially stop him. I'm sorry. No, one second. No, I'm sorry. Take it back. Step back. He's only explaining away the deraisa. He's explaining why there's only a derabana, not a deraisa. So he's not going into the question now whether it applies to a mummer or not. Take that back. He's not weighing in on that right now.
Okay, just a regular Jew. So what's the difference between? If they're not a mummer, then what's the difference between misayeh and hochech tochiach? Because the regular Jew you could stop. I mean, maybe there's somewhere in between a mummer and a regular Jew.
Well, who says it? The Dagam Ravava says that a stam mummer is someone you can't stop. He's doing it amazing, you can't stop him. Or stam mazid is a mummer, like it's really sort of becomes hainuhach. When a person becomes a mazid, the Rashi says in Shabbos that the case over there is shogeg. The case is shogeg over there. But still, it's sort of a steer a little bit. Rashi learns that it's a shogeg over there, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. But even I guess, at the same token, you also can't stop him. He's going to do it anyway. For some reason, it's for sure he's determined to take this thing, and he has the ability to do so. You can't stop him. So that's why there's only a chiyuv d'rabbanan to manea him, not to be messiah him. That comes out from the Mishnah Berurah. But this Mishnah Berurah is similar though to the way that the Dagam Avava explains the Shach. There's a similarity to it over here. The Dagam Avava said that the Shach said that when the Shach said that there's no Isser to be Sayeh a mummer, that's only when he's a mazid and you can't stop him. Because the Shach would agree if you could stop him, then there's always a chiyuv tochacha.
Right. So the question is there ever a case where there's one without the other? Hochech tochiach without mistayeh. Or do they always go hand in hand, and then Messiah should just the question still stands that it should just be a deraisa. I don't know if I'm making sense. I might need to review the.
I'm not sure what I said.
Okay, sorry. Let me review and then I'll come back maybe next week.
Just to qualify this though, so it comes out then after we see the Mishnah Berurah, and he's explaining the Magen Avram this way. So it comes out that really there aren't that many cases. There will be cases that there's a difference. We'll speak one out in a minute. But there are it's a very where mitzamtzem where the machlokus really is. everyone's agreeing, even the Shach is agreeing, after once they see the Birlach, the Sharatzion, and the Dagam Mavav, the Shach himself agrees in any case where you could stop the person, or if he's B'shogeg, or you could stop him, the Shach agrees that you're not allowed to Messiah, even though he's a mummer. We're talking about a mummer that's doing it b'mezid and you can't stop him. Okay, so that's the only case that there's really a machlokas. Anything less than that.
I think my question was, according to the Shach, is it a deraisa then? If you could stop him.
I would think so.
Yeah, okay, fine.
The Dogma Rabba doesn't go into that, but he sort of seems to be coming from the same place, the same kasha of the They said, how could this be? He says he's like any other Jew. You can't. We're chayav l'frushim yisura, and without going into the makaros for that, the makaros are makaros deraisa that you have to be mafresh a Jew from an isser. So the Rabbanan is going to be only in a case where you mamish couldn't stop him. There's no chiyuv l'frushim yisura, because I'm only mechuyev to the point that I could stop him. If I can't stop him, what can I do? What do you want from me? But still, the Rishonim and Mosif, that on top of that, now there's still an Isser Rabbanan of Messiah. That'll be the way the Mahalach of the Magen Avram, the way the Mishnah explains it. According to the Shach, there won't even be an Isser Messiah in that case. Won't be even an Isser Messiah. And the Rishonim to say that it's Asar, and there's a Rabbanan, that's only in the case where the person is not a mummer. That's how the Shach will learn, right? The Magen Avram is learning that those Rishonim were saying that then is this Isser Rabbanan even when he is a mummer. In the case you can't stop
not
him.
a mummer, and you can't stop him.
You can't. No, not a. Well, okay, yeah, not a mummer, and you can't stop him, right? I guess.
Right. So I think that's where the confusion. Okay, fine. I think I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm adding that prod in. If you assume that those Rishonim all learn like Rashi, and
right.
It's talking about shogeg.
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't learn that way. Maybe they learn that over there. It's also amazing. I'm not sure.
That way
it's on the Sugi and Shabbos, to go back to the Sugi and Shabbos.
Rabbi, the machlokas between the Shach and the Magen Avram over Messiah, can they only be cholek with each other because it's midrabanan, or they cholek over Messiah's midaraisa?
They all seem to. None of them mention. They don't really go into it. They're not mentioned. They just the stand l'shonos of the Rishonim of Tesis is that it's drabanan. The Mishnah Berurah is machadish that it's only Rabbanim because of a specific case. But the way, as that's what I'm saying, is the way the Mishnah Berurah says it, the shot in the Mishnah Berurah to say that the Rabbanan is only when you can't stop him, and still there's an Issa Messiah, the Shach will disagree with that. Because the Shach will say in a case where he's a mummer and you can't stop him, there is no Issa Messiah at all. There is no Messiah. The Rishonim weren't talking about that case. They're talking about a case of a regular Jew. With like a shogeg, whatever, that you can't, and even then, and it's just saying that where there's not trei nar, there's no derisive, but there's still a derabanan. So the shot in those Rishonim is totally different. Again, so according to the Magen Avram, those Rishonim are talking about only a case of according to the Magen Avram, those Rishonim are talking even in the case of a mummer. And what does a Magen Avram do with the steer and Tosis? I don't know. He doesn't come to answer the steer and Tosis. The Shach answers the steer and Tosis, and therefore those Rishonim are not talking about a case of a mummer at all, just a regular Jew. So it's a major machlokas. Shach and Magen Avram, what are they talking about? Those Rishonim. Now, just in the Kuda L'Maisa, just to hear a couple applications. Ramosha and the Tshuva, it's in first Chelik Yardea. First Chelik Yardea, I'm trying to remember which simon it is. I don't remember offhand right now what simon it is. He's talking about, maybe he'll come back to me. Ramosha is talking about renting out a wedding hall to a wedding that's not going to be noeg api halacha. Like Rabbi Rocco from England was asking the Shalom. That's all. They're not going to be noeg kashur. They're going to have mixed dancing there and everything. Is he allowed to? Is it lifnei to give them the wedding hall, to rent out the wedding hall to them? Are you mechuyev to only rent out a wedding hall to Jews that are going to not do any averas in it. So Moshe goes through step by step, and goes through that. Number one, Lifnei Iver it's not, because there are other halls. It's not the only hall that there is. And what about Messiah? Maybe, okay, Lifnei Iver it's not. What about Messiah? You're abetting them, you're aiding them to be able to do this because you're giving them your hall. So maybe there's still a problem with Messiah. So that Moshe brings down the Shach, and to explain the Shach, he brings the Dogam Ravava, that they're doing it b'mezid, and you can't stop them because if they don't get married by you, they're going to get married somewhere else. They're going to do the mixed dancing. They don't need you for their mixed dancing. They're going to do it wherever they are. So it's not like you're, in any way, Messiah, that's a mixed dancing. So, and he wants to say, even according to Magen Avram, it should be okay because they could dance somewhere else too. And you're not really that's a Messiah, the Rikud. He says, Adarabah, on the contrary, the Svar of the Magen Avram to Messiah to do an Avera, if they go somewhere else, if you don't let them go to your kosher hall, then they're just going to go to a non-kosher hall. And so they're going to also be over the Avera of eating treif. At least by your hall, they'll be able to at least eat kosher, by the kosher hall. So he says that, and number two, that's one svar, Moshe says. And another svar he says, which is very, very chashuv, a very big yesod in our whole sugya, is that the Isra Messiah is only when you give the person something, you help him take something which is miyuchad la'avera. It's miyuchad la'avera. Now, like it's a hefzer shel avera, miyuchad la'avera. Like let's say in the case of Shabbos, so allowing him to take that object from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, at this moment, it's not a hefzer shel isra, but it's a miyuchad la'avera at the moment. He's coming now to do an avera with this. Masha'inkin, like a wedding hall, it's miyuchad for mitzvahs. It's miyuchad for whatever you want to use it with, but especially it's miyuchad for the for doing mitzvah, for doing a chasana. If they want to then use it to do the mixed dancing, that's nothing to do with you. That's not your asek, what they do, because it's not miyuchad for that. So, and he goes on, and Smicha for Moshe that svora of not miyuchad iser is also a heter for lifnei iver as well, not just for Messiah, but it's heter for lifnei iver, because he throws out a svora and says that if there is to be a problem to give somebody something which they're going to end up doing an avera with, and if you have a store that sells dishes and silverware and things like that, so you should be not allowed to sell it to a non-frum Jew, because they're going to use those dishes to make basar b'chala. They're going to eat treif on it. So are you Messiah them to eat treif? Are you Messiah them to have basar b'chala? No, because the dishes are dishes. They're we'll call them, let's say they're parv. It's whatever you want to do with them. You're not selling them a hefzer shel iser. You're not selling something which is miyuchad iser. It's miyuchad to eat. Whatever what the person eats, that's up to them. That's not called Messiah or lifnei iver either. So Ramosha ends off that even if there isn't another place to make it, this is the only hall. This second svara that it's not miyuchad iser would be enough to be matter it. At least b'shas tzchaka, there'd be enough reason to allow it, because you're not Messiah or lifnei iver, because you're just giving him a hall. If that would be usher, then you also could never let, if you had a hotel, you couldn't let a non-frum couple rent a room out to a non-frum couple, because they're not gonna keep nida. They're not gonna keep, maybe they'll bring a sandwich in that's usher, and they're gonna eat in your room. You're gonna eat a ham sandwich in your room, or they're gonna be having isra bia nida in your room. But the room is a room. It's a room to be used for whatever you want to use it for. So if they don't have that room, they'll go to a different room, and the room is not miyuchad for isser. You're not giving them anything shel isser. Then there's no issue. So I think it's the side gadol mode in all these halachas, what Moshe is telling us. It's again a little bit to a diuk here in the sugya, which we'll talk more about when we get a little further on. But just to point it out now that we did point it out, just point it again. The Rashi says that lo yoshit adam, the first Rashi on the page in Vama Beis, lo yoshit adam kos yain lenazir shema yovel lishtoso. The Rashi is mashma that there's an issue of lifnei iver even when there's a shema. And the Tosfos says, like we pointed out, he says mistama. You need more that is going to be an avera. Now the Moshe is taking on that if something's not in Yuchad Isser, there's not an issue, there's no problem with that. Then I think that it's really what Moshe is saying is not really negea to Rashi or Tosfos over here, because Rashi and Tosfos, whether Shema is enough to be Asr or not, or you need Mistama that you're going to do it, that's only because we're talking about Yayin L'Nazir. And Yayin L'Nazir is the fact that it's a Chefsa Shel Isser for the Nazir, then even if, according to Rashi over here, even a Shema is enough to make it Asr. And Tosfos, even there, Tosfos says you need a Mistama. So that's talking about something which is, for this person, it's a Chefsa D'Isura, or Ever Ben Achai to a Goy. Mashenkin, if it's just a wedding hall, then garnish. There's no Chefsa Shel Isura at all. So maybe he'll use it, maybe he won't. So that's that Shema, even according to Rashi, is not enough to make it a problem. I mean, it's Davar Pashat. Huadin, there's a. I saw somebody write. Okay, I'll give another example. This will be, let's say you have a car rental place, and a Jew wants to come rent a car, then he's going to use your car on Shabbos. So are you enabling him to drive on Shabbos by renting him a car? So Lifnei Iver, okay, we always go through the steps. Lifnei Iver is not there. Other car rental places. It doesn't go to you, it'll go to somebody else. So it's not Trey Iver Nahar. It doesn't need Dafka you. Unless maybe you're the only car, it's a small town, there's a little small village, small town that goes to, and you're the only car rental place in the, Jews are everywhere, they're Slabafkiville, Tennessee. You might be the only one, but a normal city, so there are plenty of other places. There's no Lifnei Iver. Are you Messiah Lavera? Are you Messiah him to do Michal Shabbos? So again, since the car is not a Chefsa Shel Isser, and it could be used on Shabbos, it's going to be used 6 other days as well. It's used for all kinds of things. It's no different than selling him plates that he could use for, he might be a vegetarian and just be eating nothing but, chickpeas on them or something, or he might turn out to put a ham sandwich on there. L'maisa, you're not selling him a Chefsa Shel Isser. The fact that it's a suffix takes away any problem. There's no, he doesn't have to use it on Shabbos, even if it's likely he will. Still, it's not. You're not giving him something that says a Chefsa Shel Isser. It's a part of a thing, and you're not going to say anything.
Rebbe.
Yes.
Let's say you'd come up with a case that, unfortunately, you're a business guy and you bought the wedding hall on the black market or whatever. Somehow it was illegal. So for you to now rent it out to other Jews, Mistama, you would be over on Misayeh, even to rent it out to a completely kosher wedding. Would Rav agree to that?
Well, it's not saying you're over yourself. The one that's doing it that's renting it is.
Well, so of course the one who every second is doing it, but then if he goes ahead and now rents, subsequently rents it out to others, he would also.
The others aren't over anything. I don't think that. They're. He had kinetic zela or whatever he did to steal it. So. I don't know.
Misayeh, he would be over on Misayeh.
I don't think they're over anything to go. He has a problem. Like. I don't know, the Gemara in Sukkah who have Ankri, when they're not worried about buying from them their Rebbeos because they already had a Yush, there's Yush, Shini Rishus, whatever, they stole it, and then even if they stole it, you're not sure if they did, they were already Kona it, and then so that you're buying for them, then you're not over anything. So, you could click, besides Shani, we see Karkan and Exelis, so it's not really, so I'm not sure. That would have to go into Choshen Mishpat to see to what extent you might be Kona, have Kinyana, Exela, and Karka. To if it would have to be similar to Avankri and Sukkah or not sure, but the bigger problem is that forget the Messiah, you're being over yourself. Kol rega v'rega. The Briskerov writes that when you have a Chiyav Hashava, Hashava's Gzela, then Heshav's Gzela is a Chiyav Kol rega v'rega. It's not just a one thing. So every moment you're not returning it, then you're being over an Avera. So the bigger problem is the guy who stole it, not the one other people just going and using it. They're not stealing anything. Anyway, halacha l'maisa though, I just want to end off with Rav Moshe brings other rayas to the shach from Shvius and other places that the Sfor Kavase. So we see that Moshe actually is passing like the shach. We mentioned it's a big machlokas. There's a Gilead Marsha by us and the Shulchan Aruch by us in Yordea that is cholak on the shach, but Moshe tears apart his rayas, and really he says the Sfora is like the shach and it brings rayas to the shach, and so he says in a case where, let's say you have a hall that people want to rent it during a time that it's usher to make weddings, like they want to rent it from you in the 9 days to make a wedding. Some Jews, Reform Jews, want to make a wedding on Tisha B'Av, so you're allowed to rent it to them. So that Ramesh says that it would be kedai to be kosher for the Magen Avraham in that case, because even though there's not really Messiah, it's still just a hall, and it's you can do anything in it, and it's not lifnei iver. Still, according to the Magen Avraham, that there's a Messiah by a mummer. It would be kedai to machmat the Magen Avraham unless it's a big hefsed mammon, or you could lose your business over that or whatever. Then we can go back to the Ikar din, which is like the shach. And many times I've heard from Shmuel first, his Talmud, many shals we discussed, he right away would say, that's the shach and the Magen Avraham. It's not a problem. So, that's the Moshe held, that's the Ikar din, so it's important to know that. I saw somebody bring down, quote Ramosha, I think incorrectly, say that you see that Ramosha, the fact that he mentioned is Kadai be Machmak and Magen Avraham, so he just like harped on that, and say, you see Ramosha holds like the Magen Avraham. But you see Ramosha inside, it's clearly not that way. The whole gist of the tshuva is to bring a raya to the shach and go with the shach, and according to the pshat with the dagam ravava, and therefore in a case where you can't stop them anyway, and they're in mummer to this, or they're going to do it anyway, then so there's no chiyuv l'fish misura. There's also no isser of Messiah. So it's a very important nafkamina. Okay. Now, this is especially important to know. He's going with the shach, even though it's very possible that that Messiah is an issa d'oraisa. Rosh doesn't go into that. According to what we're saying, it's a bigger chiddush to be somach on shach if we might be dealing with a d'oraisa. But the Ma'aseh sof kol sof, the Mishnah Berurah says that if you can't stop the person, you're not chayv them for shum yisura. So then only taka does become a d'Rabbanan. At best, in most d'Rabbanan we're talking about because of that. Okay. Somebody else points out one last thing. We're just before I leave the discussion. There is somebody who points out that, and this is something I want to really talk to Poskin about. I didn't really clarify this yet to come to 100% Laskana. But today, if you go with the shach, like we said, the Dogam Avava says that the shach is talking about a case where the person is a mummer, meaning he does it b'mezid. He's doing over the avera b'mezid. That's why there's no Isser Messiah on him according to the shach. If that's the case, if you need the person to be amazed, there's manazed that most of our Rayanim are Tunak Shanishba. They don't know what they're doing, so we don't consider them amazed. So then, would the whole shach even apply to them? They even have a din mummer b'mezid to say that on them there's no din, there's no chiyuv l'fushim yisura. So it's not so pashut to me if that's going to really make enough geuna, because if the case is, if the whole lumdus of the shach, I mean, it's a big kasha, which really it would put a thorn into the whole thing. But I'm not so sure if it's true, because sof kol sof, whether or not he's a din shogig or a din mezid, like Rosh Zalman told me once, that's only really a shalom klapet karbonos, but the Maisa, if sof kol sof he's going to do it and he wants to do it and you can't stop him, right? This guy's Mechal Shabbos for Hesed. Maybe he doesn't know how bad it is to do that because he's tied that into Tunak Shanishba. The Maisa, he's doing it on purpose and you can't stop him. So then you have no chiyuv l'afrushim yisur. You have no way to be mochiach him or mocheh connecto and stop him in any way. So I'm not sure if that would make enough community now to say, well, you really are mochiach because I don't really know better. Yeah, but I can't stop him. So the Maisa, it's the same. Mitzias, it's the same. So that kasha is asking, I'm not sure if it's a real kasha. If it's a real nafkamina. I don't see necessarily the difference. if you get into the lumdas of it. Just one other nakuda in the Ritva right here that's, I'd be ashamed to miss it because it's so geschmack, that the Ritva says that even though there's an issue of lifnei iver, let's say by Avodah Zorah, we're going to we'll see the sugyas later on in Festival that you're not allowed to sell something to a goy that you might use for Avodah Zorah. On that we say there's lifnei iver. So he says that still, if let's say if somebody would hold a gun to your head and say, sell that cow to this goy that you might use for Avodah Zorah, sell it to him, or I'm going to shoot you. Now, if for Avodah Zorah itself, if the goy holds a gun and says, be Avodah Zorah or I'll shoot you, you have to be shot. And Huadin, anything that's Abizrayu de Avodah Zorah, which Abizrayu means anything that's an extension of the Avodah Zorah also, you have to be Moshe Nefesh for that. It's like the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that all the Gimel Averis Chamuros, 3 cardinal sins, Avodah Zorah, Gil Rai, Shlichus Damim, anything that's considered Abizrayu, let's say Abizrayu de Arayos, which over there the Gemara brings a case of somebody that wanted to hug somebody, or if that's Abizrayu de Arayos, they have to be Moshe Nefesh for that. You have to be shot or not do it. So the Ritva says that would not apply to Lifnei Iver of Avodah Zorah. Because he says Lifnei Iver of Avodah Zorah, let's say to selling the cow, is not an Abizrayu de Avodah Zorah. It's just an Avera Klolis of Lifnei Iver. It's not specific to the law of Lifnei Iver is not specific to Avodah Zorah. So even though the siyua through it is going to help the person do Avodah Zorah, it's not called a Abizrayu de Avodah Zorah, which means an extension of the Avodah Zorah per se. It's just a separate Avera of Lifnei Iver. So this is actually a machlokas, the Balamor and the Malchamas and the Ramban in Sanhedrin, in the Sugya of Yoreh Yavor. That the Ritva over here is learning like the Ramban over there. The Balamor Taka holds that Lifnei Iver is considered a chelik of the Avera. That's the specific Avera. But the Ramban and the Ritva hold like it says over here that it's not that. And therefore, nafkamina is you don't have to be Moshe Nefesh. You can sell the cow and not be shot. It's a very geschmack of Shaila. Okay, already had a few more things to talk about, but I'll just maybe talk about one of them because the other one is very long. So we'll just talk just briefly about the sugya, the Gemara Daf Yudalad Amud Aleph, talks about selling some kind of incense, levona, to a goy, and you're not allowed to sell that to a goy levona because they're going to maktir it in front of their Avodah Zorah. So the Gemara says that you're allowed to sell a chavila, like if you have like a package of 3 pounds of it or something like that, you could sell, because if you're selling it, then it's obviously just being sold as a product. No one buys that much to be maktir Avodah Zorah, these very small amounts. So the Gemara says, but if I sell to a goy this big 3-pound bag, so it's going to break down to hundreds of them, and he's going to sell it to all the goyim that they're going to be maktir Avodah Zorah. So it's still going to come to Avodah Zorah. So the Gemara says that even though we're mechuyev and lifnei iver, but lifnei to lifnei we're not chayav. If it's one step away, lifnei to lifnei, then there's no isser. That's what the Gemara says. So now Tosfos is not there. Tosfos is in Tes Vavim and Beis in the bottom. Dur Maska Lovid Kachavim. In the bottom, in the Sugya and Tes Vavim and Beis, the maskana is over there that it's usher to sell, let's say, an animal to a Jew who's chashud to sell it to a goy who uses it for Avodah Zorah. Right? The Yisrael himself, you're not allowed to sell a goy an animal they might use it for Avodah Zorah because you might come to also rent it to him, and he'll use it. It'll be your animal. So in a case where it's usher for a Jew to sell it to a goy, you're not allowed to sell it to a Jew. The Jew who might sell it to a goy. And not only can't sell it to the goy, but you can't sell it to a Jew who might sell it to a goy. So Tos asks a kasha that or it's lifnei to lifnei. Even if the goy is sold to a Jew, he's chashed to sell to a goy, and he does sell to a goy, and the goy uses it for Avodah Zorah, whatever. Then that's lifnei to lifnei. It's 2 steps away. The Gemara Yudalad said lifnei to lifnei is okay. What's the problem? So Tosfos answers over there that we're talking about there in Daf Yadala that's okay. We're talking about a goy selling it to a goy to sell to a goy. That the first goy has no isser to sell it to the second goy. He has no isser. He's allowed to do. There's no lifnei iver. Goy we're not mechuyev in lifnei iver. We're mechuyev in lifnei iver of a goy. So I can't sell it to the goy that's going to be able to put a zara. But to sell it to a goy who might sell it to another goy, that's what the Gemara is saying. There's lifnei to lifnei. That's not a problem. Mashenkin to sell it to a Jew, that if he sells it to a goy, he's going to be over an avera. That's called chad lifnei. That's only one lifnei. It's not lifnei to lifnei. As the Tosfos answers in the second teretz. In the second teretz. In the first teretz, Tosfos says in the name of Rabbeinu Elchanan, he says that of a hacha d'mayir b'Yisrael hachashid anamuz harin shelo yavo shum Yisrael l'dei takala al yadenu. We're mechuyev to make sure no Jew has any takala that comes through us. So this sounds like the ritva that we saw before. That there's an isser of, it's like a messiah type of thing, but Tosfos is putting that into lifnei iver. That even though the first teretz says enachanavias taka lifnei to lifnei, but since we're talking about a Jew, so we're causing him to do something wrong. So we're musar in general not to bring lidei avera. It's a little hard to understand what's really the chilik in the two terutzim. The second teretz of Tosfos is that it's only one lifnei, not two. It needs a lot of time to figure out, and I haven't really come to those kinds. Chazanish in Sudan Samach Beis talks about it, and I didn't quite understand how he's trying to explain the chilik in the two terutzim. Well, the Ma'aseh Tosfos is saying that I'm mechuyev to make sure that no Jew does any avera, and Messiah in any way to do an avera. So that's why I can't do it. So that's a chiluk between selling it to a Jew that's going to do something wrong to a goy, or selling it to a goy. So that's the chiluk lifnei. Now the ritva in Daf Yadalad, he says a very chashuv thing. Also, I mean, it's similar to that Tosfos, but here he asks the kasha that lifnei is mutter. We said, and the Gemara says in Samachei, by a beggar that she'avad bo klayim, you're not allowed to sell to a goy. You have a beggar that you can't tell it's klayim. You can't sell to a goy because you might sell it to a Jew. It's lifnei to lifnei. So he answers, over there, we're worried about a Jew getting it. Because we're musar shelo ligrom ayadenu shum takala savera. We can't cause through our hands any takala come out for another Jew, even though it's going to be 2 steps removed, but I'm still causing it to happen. So nothing should ever leave our hands that should possibly cause another Jew to do an avera. It's like the Gemara says many times that chazak al chaver she'enu yotzim yado davar she'enu mesukhan, because somebody might be nichshel in it. So we can't let a nichshel ever come out of our hands. Even though it's not mamish lifnei iver, because lifnei iver is to give somebody a nichshel mamish, that we give them something that's sheyavur ba'avera. There's no lifnei iver unless we give him oisay the mishiyavur ba'avera. It's like a Torah's vadai. There's going to be over an avera, which is similar, like Tosfos sounds like in Vavam and Beis. That it has to be a chazaka or whatever, that you're giving it something that's going to be over a ver with. So the ritva is, in a certain way, is similar to, I mean, he doesn't ask from the Gemara in Tesvav and Beis, well, to see what he says over there, but it's a similar type of idea that we can't be gorim any avera. So that's what Tosfos says in the first teretz, it's also in Tesvav. So the bottom line is the heter of lifnei to lifnei, that is only being said from if the 2 lifneis are by goyim, or if the first person you give it to is not mechuyev to worry about the second person. So that's just an important nakuda.
Rabbi, how does the Gorim of Avera fit in with the discussion with the Shach and the Magen Avraham then? Or a Tinuk Shenishba? It's still being Gorim.
To say it's dumya to, very good. It's dumya to the case over there of Beged Shava Baklayim, that you don't know that it's Klayim, so you're going to have an unsuspecting Jew going to be over. we have to make sure that when the Gemara says throughout Shas that chazaka shechaver ena motzi davar ena sukam yadai, an unsuspecting Jew that won't know that it's tevel. So, because the ikar din lifnei iver will be like shogeg, like Tosfos himself said that the yain lenazar will be. How's it going to be over there? Because he'll forget that it's a nazir. We're not talking about a mezid. We're talking about shogegin or things that people won't realize is a problem. That's the ikar issue. So on there, we're musar to make sure that such a thing shouldn't happen through on our watch, coming out of our hands. Such a thing shouldn't happen. So we're not talking about a case where a person is mazed and knows what he's doing and is coming, can't stop him. That's a mummer case, and that's a specific case in Tosfos and Daf Vav. Okay, I wanted to go into the Sugya and Tes Vav. I guess we'll talk about that next time because there's a lot to talk about over there, Mr. Hashem. Okay, so I just want to wish everybody the next time we'll be after. We haven't been Kabbalah Torah yet, so next time we learn will be after Kabbalah Torah. So Mr. Hashem, we should be zocha to all the chronim we had and all this learning. I just want to. I thought of this before. I just forgot to say it, so I just want to mention now that the learning was in the schus of our achenu v'achasenu in Eretz Yisrael, that everybody should be healthy and nothing should happen to them there. And that's schus, and we should, Mr. Shem, get ready for Kabbalah Torah and the Achdus and the Torah that we learn and Achdus together for Kabbalah Torah. That should be a schus for Eretz Yisrael and for to be Magen. Aleinu v'Kol Yisrael.
Amen. Amen.
Sure, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good yom tov.
Good yom tov.